So when I was putting together the Choremaster generator in one of my previous videos, after I was putting the alternator back together, essentially clamp on the bell end of the alternator, but there's 4 bolts that hold it all together, and when I twisted off one of the bolts, you can see here, and it's sort of a hard one to come by. It's a metric bolt M6, and then the thread is 1mm threads. So it was kind of a pain to get down to our local fastener company. Calgary Fasteners is one. There's a Bolt Supply House. The other one, it's a big one. The other one, I can't remember the name. Anyways, and a lot of times they don't have the size you need, or even the bolt in stock necessarily, especially metric. Sometimes they're light on the metric side. But I took a machining class about a couple months ago. It was mostly learning work on a lathe, and so I figured I'd try to make one, and I did to some extent. So what you see here is I had a section of 3/8 rod that I had laying around, threaded rod, and I ended up cutting off a section of that rod and then sticking it in a lathe and turning it down to get the rough diameter of the bolt. The bolt I measured, the original bolt, they say it's a 6mm, but it was actually more like 5.75, 5.79 millimeters. So a little bit smaller than a full 6. So I turned it down at work. The shop I work at, where I work, they have a shop there's a millwright shop, and they have a couple of lathes and a couple of milling machines and some good drill presses. So I used the lathe to turn down the ready rod, or the threaded rod, however you guys want to call it. And you can see it wasn't the best. I found that I don't know if it was the issue with the milling tool, the lathe tool, like if it wasn't sharp enough, but it could have been just the way I was doing it too. The bolt, or the rod, would deflect away from the tool as the tool was digging in, and you're turning the bolt down. So you can see here, the finished surface isn't all that great, and the diameter is fairly variable across the whole of the bolt. So by whatever reason, this end, which is going to be the end that goes into the casing, it's a lot closer to 6mm. Like even just running my fingers over here, I can feel a slight hump over it. So I had to actually file this end down by hand in order that I could get the threading die on, the M6 1mm threading die. And then this side, the threads were, I had machined it down, or turned it down too far. So when I was threading on the bolts to make the bolt end, or sorry, the nuts to make the bolt end, they're pretty loose because the threads weren't really deep enough, and they weren't really grabbing. So I just ended up JB welding it together to sort of make the head end, the bolt head, and out of the 2 nuts. So we'll see how that works. I don't know. I'm kind of I've had good success with JB Weld on some stuff, and not some good success. So I'm not sure if it's my fault, not doing a good mixing or an application and prep, but we'll see. Anyways, I'll be putting this into my generator. So that was just something I kind of did for a little bit of machining practice, lathe practice, to make my own bolt, and it's going to be functional. It's not pretty though, so nothing ever is.